guys, Allison here, the Bored Housewife. Thank you so much for joining me for another week's episode of the Bored Housewife. If this is your first episode, I highly recommend at least taking a listen to last week's episode first. We have been getting into the book called The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Steven Pressfield. This is a series. This is the second part of a 4-part series for the month of March, where we are looking into this book and talking about the different ideas in it. There is this thing called resistance, and in last week's episode, we learned a little bit about what that is. And, to sum it up, resistance is basically just the distractions, the excuses, the thing in our life that stops us from doing what we really want to be doing. Whether that's, picking up a new hobby or something that's, new and important to you, making a big life choice and changing a career course, investing money in something, or, what a lot of people have in this book is very particular towards is someone who has more artistic calling or a creative calling, and that being writing, painting, dancing, those sorts of things. But it can help in so many different ways, in weight loss, in self-improvement, if you're dealing with addiction. There's anything that you're trying to do that is going to be a long-term goal, not something that is just immediate gratification. This book can definitely help you get there. So this week we are going to learn how to overcome that. And so we are going into book 2 of The War of Art. This book is broken up into 3 books. And like I said, last week we looked at the first book and talked about the resistance and identified what that is. Hopefully you had some time to think about what that is for you. And I did a lot of self-reflection and it is so blaringly obvious now. But yeah, I really like the resistance. I really like it to win all the time. So we talked about stuff like that. And so now this week we're going to talk about a little bit of overcoming the resistance, identifying it, and then also figuring out how to, make ourselves do the thing that we want to do. So, with that being said, let's get into the episode, guys. I am sipping on some wine this evening, and so grab some wine or a cocktail, your beverage of choice, whatever it may be, and cheers, guys. Let's have some fun. Okay, so, man, I am so happy I'm reading this book again. I think I mentioned this a lot last week, but every time I reread this book, it just inspires me and just brings so many things to light. So much of what we do in our lives is just constantly adjusting to our new circumstances. And when we have life thrown at us, the different things, I think it sometimes jumbles us up and we forget, how to be organized, pursue the things that we want to do. Other things end up being priorities and kind of change how we look, our perspective changes. So it's always great to have stuff like this that you can go back and look to, so that when you're feeling out of it, right, and you're like, God, my life is it just feels so chaotic, or why am I not doing this thing when I used to be so good at doing it? Sometimes something so simple as just reading a quote or hearing someone talk or, reading a book or something, can place it for you and kind of bring you back and be like, oh yeah, this is it, right? And it's like there's just so much in our heads all the time, like thoughts and feelings and things going on, that it's hard to constantly remember these ideas. And so it's really cool when you have a really great reference that, when you start getting into that place and you're thinking to yourself like, man, this isn't going well. This isn't going well. Like, why is my life so chaotic? And then can read something. It's pretty cool when it kind of like sets you back into motion again. So, at least that's how I feel right now. I'm feeling really good about this. So, the first thing I want to talk about that the author talks about in this book, and specifically the second book now, as we're combating resistance, right? He talks about the amateur versus the pro. So what's the difference there, right? He talks about the amateur being the weekend warrior. The amateur doesn't really fully love what they do. They might think that they really love this thing, but they wouldn't die for it. It's not like if they end up not fulfilling it, it's not like a piece of their soul is gone. It might be a little bit of a regret, like, oh, I wish I would have done that thing. But, it's not going to be one of those things where it's like, I'm, whatever. It's not that big of a deal to them, right? Okay. So the pro, however, is in love with what they do. And that is a very interesting kind of phrase that he uses, because I'm going to say this now, and it might come up more in the episode, but just because the professional is in love with what they do doesn't necessarily mean that it's an all-encompassing love. It just means that in the moment while they're doing this thing, and while they're facing the resistance and all these things, the kind of love for the writing, the love for the painting, the love for the entrepreneurship, all of that is kind of the guiding force behind why they're doing this. And it's like, I used to hear this, there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it or where it came from, and I'm totally going to botch the quote because that's what I love to do. But it's something like, if you don't have to be a writer, then don't be. Basically, it's just like being a writer, being somebody who has a passion for something, having something that you have to do because you can't live your life without doing it, is more of a burden than somebody who can, just go ahead and go work a normal job. Like, basically they're saying yeah, it might sound really cool to be a writer, it might sound really cool to be this or that, but the actual work and torture and, all the different things that you go through having to do these things is not worth it unless you love it. So that's kind of something to put in perspective between the professional and the amateur. When you're thinking of this thing that you want to do, where do you lie? And I will say for right now, I am 100% amateur. And I am trying to cross that line to professional. And I've tried to cross that line several times, and it's I keep just bouncing back to amateur because I let life and resistance get in my way. So the one thing that I was reading, or that I was thinking about when I was thinking this, and he talks about all these different things that this book can relate to. So I'm like, what if you're just somebody who's having a hard time working out and you want to make this part of your lifestyle? You're not going to think of yourself as a professional athlete, or you're not going to think of yourself as a professional fitness person necessarily. And so I wanted to kind of talk about if that's something that you're doing, or if you have a normal job and this passion of yours that you're doing is more of a weekend thing or an evening sort of thing, that's still okay. This can still totally apply to you. I think you just have to think of it in the way of a professional versus an amateur. So basically when those feelings of resistance come up, the amateur will let them stop them from doing it. Okay, so let's take exercise, for instance. If you're somebody, because I'm actually going through this right now myself too. So, I'm not like a fitness expert or anything like that, but I want to make fitness and exercise a priority in my life, and I want to make it a long-term priority. Like, I want to do it 5 days a week for the rest of my life, okay? Like, God willing, for as, if I'm, unless I'm hurt or need a break, or something like that because of, like, physical, like, ailment, then okay, but, like, as long as my body is willing and able, I want to be on top of it like that. So, there is still the feeling of resistance every morning when I wake up, and I'm just like, ugh, like, I don't want to do this, like, maybe I can skip today. But that's where I am starting to move into the professional kind of outlook on my fitness, because I've determined that this isn't something that's just, a silly little thing that I do when I feel like it. Like, I've decided, like, I'm no longer an amateur at working out. I am a professional, and I'm using that in the sense of, like, again, I don't know everything. Like, there's people out there that are obviously, like, personal trainers and, like, professionals in the industry. But I'm taking myself seriously as those people would with their fitness, or with the sort of dedication that they would, expect from their clients, right? So I think if you kind of think of it that way, if you're somebody who has a hobby or something that you're trying to get into on the weekends or, like, on an evening sort of thing, because that's when you have the time to do it, don't feel like because you're not dedicating, like, all this time during the week, this isn't important to you and all of that. Just look at it like what your circumstances can do for you in this time, and whatever time you can dedicate to the thing that you're doing, make sure you uphold to your standards. And if you're, if it's like a weekend, like every Saturday you're going to do this thing or whatever, then make sure every Saturday you're there showing up, right? And so that's really, I think, kind of the difference between the amateur and professional that he's going to be referencing throughout this whole book, is that, the amateur doesn't take themselves as seriously as a professional would. So again, whatever sort of schedule that you can set up for yourself, just you need to make sure that you're sticking to it, and that when those feelings of resistance are coming up, you're figuring out how to overcome them. Okay, so there's a lot of interesting ideas in this book that we're going to talk about today. Again, I'm going to be doing a lot of reading. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the principle of priority. And this is on page 65. So he says here, the principle of priority, which states, A, you must know the difference between what is urgent and what is important, and B, you must do what's important first. So let me read that again, because this one definitely made me pause. And I was like, wait, what? So the principle of priority is you must know the difference between what is urgent and what is important. Then you must do what's important first. So I will say I already failed at this today. What he's saying is there are going to be things that come up. There's going to be a phone call, an email, whatever. In my scenario, it was like, man, your bathroom is getting really gross. And I told you guys this last week. I have a hierarchy of procrastination, and writing and podcasting are in the very bottom totem of this, okay? So I will go through everything else, and I will even clean the fucking bathrooms, which I hate, okay, before doing what I need to do. Well, my upstairs was messy, and I needed to clean it up, and I needed to clean the bathrooms. Like, they were, like, kind of starting to gross me out. So I'm like, you really need to work on your podcast today. So what did I do? I cleaned the bathrooms. And it worked out that I still had time to do the podcast, but that's not what I should have done. I let resistance get the best of me, and in my head I was like, oh, well, you have, several more days that you can do the podcast. Like, you don't have to do it today. But today is when I said I was going to do it. And had I not had this time that I figured out that I could do it right now, I probably would have still put it off and still put it off until the last minute, finding better excuses. So this is something that is definitely challenging for me right now because the podcast even has more urgency than my writing does. And I will totally put the writing on the back burner to everything else. So you need to identify those things. And it's hard because sometimes you're like, you know, in my scenario, I'm like, oh, these bathrooms really need to get done though. Like, if I don't do them right now, I don't know when I'm going to get them done. But are the bathrooms, like, fulfilling my soul and my purpose the same way making this podcast is, or writing something meaningful? Absolutely not. Like, they're already kind of gross. Like, another day isn't going to make them that much worse. Like, and I know I probably sound so nasty, but it's just like, I could have also done them like 2 days ago or whatever. And, you know, I kept putting them off for other things. So the point is, bathrooms being clean are not as important as me making this podcast or doing writing, because they only have a certain level of fulfillment in my life. Do I want my bathrooms clean? Absolutely. Like, do I want like a nice place to like have and, you know, whatever? Of course. But you know, this was on my list of priorities today, and I totally blew it off to clean the bathrooms. So that's like kind of the first thing we need to figure out, like, what are your priorities, what's urgent, and make sure that the thing that's more important definitely always trumps the urgency. And it's hard. Like, again, this stuff is not easy to do, guys, and I am a living example of it. Like, you are going to feel so torn sometimes, and I'm going to get to it towards the end of the episode, but this feeling will never go away. So it's something that we have to figure out and sit with that, like, get comfortable sitting with it, because this isn't something that is like, oh, I'm going to like read this book and then all my troubles are going to go away. Like, no, they actually just get worse because you're going to realize what you're doing. But anyways, let's get into that in a minute. So the next thing is, you know, we have our priorities in place, okay? So then the next thing he kind of talks about is, you know, with this and like what we find important and the urgency and everything like that, like, most of us have like some sort of job, or if you're like a housewife like me, you have bathrooms, you have your house that you keep clean. There's certain things in your life that is like a job, okay? Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom, you got to take care of your kids. Like, you know, maintaining our home is our job, right? Or maybe you have like another job, another side job, whatever it is that you have going on. But his whole point is that in those things that we're already doing, we've already established all of these things, and I'm going to read them in a minute, that we can apply to the thing that we want to do. So how I approach myself in a job, or how I approach myself as a housewife, I can totally put all of those principles and those, you know, habits and things into what I'm already doing. So he talks about we show up every day, right? So if you have a job, if you are a mom, especially if you're a mom, you don't get to just choose to like, oh, sick day, sorry, I'm calling out. Like, no, like, we show up every single day. We do what we need to do. We have the things that we go through, right? That's a professional. You're there every single day. You show up no matter what, right? So again, if you're sick or you have stuff going on, like, I know for sure, like, my mom, she was a single mother. Like, she had to go to work, and if I was sick, like, she would have to figure out other scenarios for me. It wasn't always that mommy just got to call out from work and take care of me because I was sick. Even though I was definitely a priority in my mom's life, you know, her job was also very much of a priority, and she needed to make money, so it wasn't an option for her to always just like call out. So you know, we show up, we figure out solutions, right? And no matter what, we're there, and people know that they can depend on us. Like, that's part of it. You know, taking a job and keeping a job, right, is being dependable and people knowing where you stand. We stay at the job all day. Again, like, he said, some of the time you might daydream, you might look on your phone, you might look on Facebook, whatever, but your body is there doing what you need to do. So, yes, I'm a housewife. I have, I'm in my home, but like I'm there doing the dishes, getting the laundry done, cleaning the house. I'm there if my husband calls and needs a favor. There's different things that I do, and I'm here all day for it, right? Other people are at their jobs. Like, yeah, again, like I said, you might get on Facebook or something, but you're there to answer the phone. You're there if somebody needs to talk to you in person, whatever. We are committed for the long haul. So most of the time, we're not just giving up, right? You start a new job, most people try to give it at least a year. If it's not going well, they still try to at least stay for a good year. Again, if you're a mom, if you're a stay-at-home wife, like there's nowhere that you're going. You've committed to these people and your family, and you're there. You're not going anywhere. The stakes for us are high and real. So, this isn't something that is looked at lightly. Like, if you're working a job, you can't just mouth off to your boss and expect to have a job still, right? Like, everything that you do is a factor into where you stand with everybody. If you decide to be a housewife, like, there's a lot of different things that have been decided and being able to do that. If you're a stay-at-home mom, same sort of thing. So it's not like you can just, again, like give up or mouth off to the wrong people or put yourself in a scenario that's going to make your current scenario not work out anymore. We accept, I have such a hard time with some of these words. We accept remuneration, thank you, for our labor. We're not here for fun, we work for money. So, okay, if you're a housewife or a stay-at-home mom, you're probably not getting a paycheck. But you might be doing that in lieu of paying somebody else, right? So if you're a stay-at-home mom, you're actually saving money probably by not having your kids go to daycare. If you're a stay-at-home wife, like, it's more of a nice thing to be able to do sometimes, but there definitely isn't a price tag on what I can do, right? Because if we wanted to hire a cleaner or a cook or whatever, like, obviously that's not something that we can afford. So I get to provide that for us without having to have, pay somebody else to do that. But people who have jobs and whatnot, you're not going in there for fun. You're going in there and doing it for a paycheck. We do not over-identify with our jobs. So I'm going to come back to this one. This is number 7 on page 70. I'm going to come back to this one in just a minute. Okay, I'm like looking at my notes, like, where am I at here? Yeah, in just a minute. So remember that one. We do not over-identify with our jobs. Number 8, we master the technique of our job. So our job, has some sort of, skill level to it. Even if it, is more on the simple side, there's still an aspect that we learned and we're, proficient at it. And that's how we get to keep our job. We have a sense of humor about our jobs. If you have a job that's not like your dream job, right? Or even if it is your dream job, like usually there's aspects of it that you gotta laugh at because not every day is a perfect day, and shit happens. And so it's like, you can either be angry and upset about different things, but in the grand scheme of it, it's much better to kind of like poke fun at the things that aren't working, right? Versus just sitting there being negative and complaining all the time. And then the number 10 is we receive praise or blame in the real world. So whatever you do at your job, you have accountability, right? If you do a great job, you get a big, star and pat on the back from your boss, and everyone's like, great. If you fuck up, then it's like, hey, yeah, that was really bad. You fucked up today. But regardless of what that is, it's you take ownership of the things that you do. And, usually the higher up you move, the more responsibility you have, right? Same for a housewife or a stay-at-home mom. it can still apply because, you know, what's going on in your house is going to be totally controlled by you. So, you know, maybe the culture, the tone, just anything that you have going on, like the stay-at-home mom or the housewife can have a lot of influence over what's going on there. So, yeah. So, you know, putting these things into perspective can kind of help us and use them for the thing that we want to do. So if I want to exercise more often and make that part of my life, I can approach it in the same sort of way that, you know, I would approach a job. Showing up every day. Like, I am making, like, my schedule to be Monday through Friday, I work out in the morning. Okay, I show up no matter what. Even if I'm not feeling great, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do something. Even if it's not my best performance ever, I'm going to at least half-ass it and call it good. We stay at the job all day. I'm going to commit myself 30 minutes to working out every day. Then I'm going to, you know, put in the best effort I have for 30 minutes. Even if it's not the best workout I've ever done, at least I'm there, I'm present, I'm doing it. We're committed to the long haul. I know this is a long-term thing for me. I want it to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. So this isn't just something that I'm doing right now. I'm trying to get in my head that this is forever. You have to wake up every day and decide to do this. The stakes for us are high and real. This is definitely a matter of my health and my health in the long term. So, yeah, the stakes are extremely high. I definitely want to put my body in a good position, in a great place that, you know, I can be independent for as long as I can. Okay, so we, you know, accept money for our labor. In that scenario, it's a little bit harder to put it towards working out. But I think it's just kind of another thing, like, just approach it as if you're getting paid, like as if you're getting paid. If that helps you, I don't think that personally would help me, but if it would help you, like, I guess, you know, you could put it in this way. Some people, you know, give themselves a little wine treat after doing something. People buy themselves a new workout new workout outfit if they hit a certain goal. Maybe you get to have coffee. Maybe you get to have a half hour of TV. Like, whatever it is, if that actually helps you, actually that probably does help you. I know that probably helps a lot of people. You know, give yourself a prize for doing, you know, I woke up every day and made my workout goal. Like, Saturday, I get to sleep in, or, you know, whatever it is for you. We do not over-identify with our jobs. So, you know, just because, and this is something that I think I see a lot in the fitness world, it's something that you do. You don't have to live, breathe everything fitness, right? It's one of those things, like, you know, if you go on a trip, you don't have to post pictures of it. Like, the trip did happen, whether or not anybody knows about it. If you like doing those things, by all means, do those sorts of things. But sometimes when we over-identify with things, it kind of, you know, well, we're going to get into this in a minute, but, you know, you don't have to say to everybody every single day, like, oh, I worked out, oh, I worked out. It can be a quiet thing that you do for yourself, and nobody else needs to know about it. We master a technique of our jobs. We certainly master our different workouts. The more we do them, the better they get, the easier they come, the more, you know, mindful and all of that we get about our health, and it's great. We have a sense of humor about that stuff, okay? Yeah, I laugh at myself during my workouts all the time. I'm constantly goofing off and making dumb mistakes with the movements. Some of the movements are really hard, and luckily right now I'm in my house most of the time when I work out, but I've definitely embarrassed myself in the gym before, and we've all seen those videos on the, you know, social media and whatnot. So you just gotta laugh, right? And then we receive praise or blame in the real world. So in a working out scenario, whether you see results or not, it is going to be 100% up to you, right? You know, no one's necessarily going to be mad at you if you don't work out, but you might be mad at yourself. And so anything that comes from dedicating yourself to working out, to exercise, to eating healthy, any sort of like fitness scenario like that, is going to be all you. Whether you stuck to your plan, whether you didn't, that's all going to be on you. Your feelings and everything are going to be directly related to what you did. So, 1 minute. All right, so back to number 7, okay? We do not over-identify with our jobs. So why is this important? Because when we're over, and this is what Stephen Pressfield says, when he is overly invested in its success and over terrified of its failure. So when we put too much investment into the thing that we're doing. So for me, writing, I'm a writer. This is who I am. I live and breathe writing every single day. What that ends up doing is it doesn't, because you know how we talked about in the first book, like there's kind of two people. There's people who do the thing, and then there's yourself. And it's really important to separate yourself from this, because then, for one, all the other things that we talked about, like the healing and stuff like that, the artist, the creative person, the person inside of you that has this goal, right? They get to be kind of untouchable. And so when we try to put this kind of, I don't want to say tainted, but this person that has all this stuff going on, it mucks it up. And this thing is already, really special and precious, and it needs to be treated really gently. And then we go and are like, oh no, I'm all of this. I am all a writer. This is who I am, right? Then you're really putting it out there, where before it was kind of protected inside of you. Now it's like out on your sleeve, and anything that happens to it, you're going to be like, oh my God. And the thing is there's going to be a lot that happens to it, right? So it kind of needs to live inside of you a little bit, so that it has like a level of protection around it to kind of keep it safe, because then whatever happens, it's not your little inner self reacting, it's you reacting. So, for instance, I am writing a screenplay and it gets, really bad read from people, and nobody likes it, and they have all this criticism, okay? I can take that criticism and look at it logically and respectfully and decide what I want to do with it, versus me being the full encompassing artist and just falling to pieces because nobody likes what I wrote. I can then kind of have a conversation with that artist. And so that's kind of what he is getting into. On page, see if I can get it to it, 86, he says, the professional identifies with her consciousness and her will, not with the matter that her consciousness and will manipulate to serve her art. Does Madonna walk around the house in cone bras and come fuck me bustiers? She's too busy planning D-Day. Madonna does not identify with Madonna. Madonna employs Madonna. So by kind of employing yourself, you get to deal with the artist in a different way, because you know how people always talk about like, oh, artists are so temperamental, and it's like, it's kind of true when you think about who that is that's creating the thing or doing the whatever, right? That person's really sensitive. And so again, if you're somebody that's trying to work out and commit yourself to this, like, all of that's going to have so many emotions and feelings and things about it. If you have to, talk to anybody about it, you don't want that person talking to them. You want somebody who's kind of more on the outside of it, that's more logical and better able to kind of take the heat if someone's like, oh, well, you missed a workout today. Well, yeah, today I did miss workout, When we think of kind of more employing ourselves, it gives us a little bit, not necessarily like freedom, but it just kind of, I think, protects what we're doing a little bit better. And then on page 88, he says, The professional loves her work. She is invested in it wholeheartedly, but she does not forget that the work is not her. The artistic self contains many works and many performances. Already the next is percolating inside her. The next will be better, and the one after that, better still. She'll be back tomorrow. So, again, like when we just allow the artist to do the artist thing, the creative person, whatever it is, and I'm saying that in kind of a broad term, like whatever the thing is that you're trying to do, right? Whatever your calling is for, when we just allow them to do their thing, then they don't have to be busied by all this outside noise, right? We can take the brunt of all of that, and instead they just get to create. And as they're creating, and as you're taking in the criticism, they're creating more stuff and more stuff. And so, again, by kind of like keeping the two separate, your creative self isn't going to get mucked up with all of the outside bullshit. And then the last thing is saying to kind of think of yourself as a corporation. And so he called it like myself incorporated. And he says here, making yourself a corporation or just thinking of yourself in that way reinforces the idea of professionalism because it separates the artist doing the work from the will and consciousness running the show. No matter how much abuse is heaped on the head of the former, the latter takes it in stride and keeps on trucking. Conversely, with success, you, the writer, might get a swelled head, but you, the boss, remember how to take yourself down a peg. So by doing this, you kind of keep yourself humble, and I'm getting into that in a minute. But you know, you are treating the creative person as, again, the separate person who does a separate thing, and that person is just there solely to create. And you kind of, you know, you get to employ them. You get to handle all the bullshit on the outside without it having to taint the beautiful thing that you're trying to create. Okay, so the professional plays for money, and this term I think is interesting, and if you're reading this book, I think when he says that, like, yeah, of course it would be awesome to get paid for what you're doing, but again, if there are certain things that you're doing that are literally just for yourself and they're not money-making things, obviously, like, you're not going to get paid money to do them, and you shouldn't necessarily expect it. I think more the point there is that you should work towards this as if you are getting paid money. So for me as a writer, like, I'm going to have to do a lot of writing before I get paid to do any of it. There will be, you know, if I'm fortunate enough, there will be a time when I can figure out the line and what do you do for free, what don't you do for free. You know, my own projects, of course, I'm going to do for free, but when somebody starts asking you to do something, then you have to start, you know, requiring payment. So, but, you know, with my working out, I'm never going to be paid to do that, but I'm having other sorts of investments, right? So I have this long-term health investment that if I work out, you know, hopefully my health will be better. And whatever that is that you're doing, you know, it's feeding your soul at the end of the day. Like, you've decided that this is important to you and important to your life. And even if it's not a monetary investment, it's still an investment for your soul. And, you know, giving yourself, you know, whatever that is really important to your meaning and your fulfillment. So then he kind of goes on to say that you are never above a job. So, you know, you should really try to keep humility in what you're doing. You cannot allow yourself to be humiliated. Being in the game is better than the sidelines. So, this one, again, like, what are you doing? What are you up for? You have to stay really humble. And, you know, for me, I've said this before, like, when I left my job, that was really hard, right? And it wasn't like I had worked myself up super high or anything, but just getting in the industry as a PA in a writer's room is really difficult. So I've realized, like, if I ever get to go back to that, if I ever do want to go back to that, I might have to start from the bottom again. So even though where I left off, I was trying to, like, kind of jump up into, like, the next role, someone might not be willing to hire me in that sort of role. The people that I've met, the connections that I have, you kind of just got to go with what you can get. And so you really have to be humble and like understanding where you're at and the whole pay your dues sort of thing. Now, I do think there's a time where you have to advocate for yourself. But all of that's very delicate, and you kind of got to like figure that out for where you are. But really, I mean, when it comes down to it, if that's the only person knocking for this certain sort of position or this sort of thing, then sometimes we just have to take it. Again, like in my industry, when I first started out, like how I even ended up in the writer's room would have never happened if I wouldn't have originally gotten turned down to work as an office PA on the show that I was working on. And getting turned down for that job was really hard, but I, like a week later, ended up getting hired on the same show in the art department. Not something I ever thought I would want to do, but I really needed a job at the time. And through just the people that I met in the art department and sort of the places that I got landed and the timing and everything, it ended up working out really well for me. And so that's just something that sometimes it's really hard and you don't know where it's going, but when it's the only thing knocking, then you have to take it and you have to make the opportunity out of it, right? And again, with that being said, like, he talks about writing a screenplay and how it was just like a massive failure. And it's like, okay, like, this really sucks. It sucked so bad, right? But what is cool about it is that I even had an opportunity to suck. How many people don't even get an opportunity to suck, So I think that's just something with whatever that you're working towards, like, have the gratitude, have the humility, be humble in the fact that even if it's not going exactly the way you want it to be, stay in the game, because it's better to be in the game than not, right? And so then he also talks about how we can't allow others to affect our emotional state. So he said the professional can't allow the actions of others to define his reality. Nothing matters but that he keeps working. So again, this kind of plays into that, and then into this next thing that he says, the professional learns to recognize envy-driven criticism and to take it for what it is, the supreme compliment. The critic hates most that which he would have done himself if he had had the guts. So, I think that's one of those too, like, those who can't do teach sort of thing. But it's really about sort of, being open-minded and, listening to what people have to say, listening to the criticism, listening to whatever, but not allowing these people to fully affect what you're doing. So I remember a girl had told me once she was doing a project on Fred Astaire, and if you guys don't know who Fred Astaire is, you should look him up right now, okay? But Fred Astaire was a movie star, dancer, singer, I guess in like the 30s and 40s, and, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, okay? So one of his first auditions, or after several auditions that he had been to, he wasn't getting hired, and he, supposedly this is how the story goes, he swiped his dance card, which is like the card that they write on while they're looking at you while you're auditioning. And it said, okay singer, or like good, pretty decent singer or something like that, terrible dancer. So, like, Fred Astaire went on, like, he's known for his dancing. Like, that is, like, if anything, he's even more known for his dancing over his singing. And so, I think that just goes to show, like, when you have a passion and when you have this innate thing in you, as Fred Astaire wanted to sing and dance and perform in films, right? He didn't stop. Okay, so we must accept the real-world challenges, realizing that life is not fair. He talks a lot about learning to be miserable to get over the hump of resistance. Act like your life depends on it. So I think another thing is just another thing that separates the amateur from the professional is that the amateur will give up very quickly. It's too hard. I'm not fully into this. And this is where the love thing comes from. It's like you have to have a deep love for this thing because it will be hard to accomplish. And so, learning to be miserable is like, and he kind of had this whole explanation with this like hawk hunting for his dinner sort of thing. But basically, it's just like the first few hours that he sits down writing is just miserable. It's getting over this hump. It's like, okay, like basically kind of writing for the sake of writing. And then as he's doing it, he's gaining inspiration. He gets into the groove, all of that. He talks about, along with this Marine example, which I think is very fitting because my husband is in the Marine Corps. But he says here, the artist committing himself to his calling has volunteered for hell, whether he knows it or not. The artist must be like that Marine. He has to know how to be miserable. He has to love being miserable. He has to take pride in being more miserable than any other soldier or swabby or jet jockey, because this is war, baby, and war is hell. And this is on page 68. Soldier, swabby, jet jockey, I'm pretty sure those are all like derogatory terms for other military members. So I'm sorry if your husband or whoever's watching this, if you're in another branch of the military. I think he's just kind of being silly here because turns out Stephen Pressfield himself was a Marine. So he's going to give shit to those branches, of course. But he's not wrong. I'm pretty sure the Marines, they definitely pride themselves of being the toughest, and we have the least, and we do the most with the least sort of mentality. They are very prideful in that, even though they will complain all the time. They do take a lot of pride in doing that, and so there is an aspect of that to being an artist is you have to sit in this and just deal with the shit, and you have to sit and it is kind of like war, right? I mean, it's what the book is titled, and so it's like, when you're sitting there at your computer and you've dedicated this time and you so don't want to be there, or you're waking up in the morning and it's time for you to work out and you need to work out, like you need to get up and do this, and it's just like, 5 more minutes, right? 10 more minutes. I remember my husband told me, Jocko, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's, I think he was a Navy SEAL. I don't know. I'm totally going to botch this probably. But he was in some of the special forces, military. And he worked his ass off to get where he was. And he today is very, an influencer, very influential in the fitness world, but also just he does a lot of different things, right? And my husband told me that he tells the story of, like, he runs, I don't know how many crazy miles every single day because he's a crazy person. No, he's not. He's just very committed to himself and his fitness. But every morning he stares at his tennis shoes and doesn't want to put them on and forces himself to put them on. So, there's just a level of that where it's like, it's not fun, right, guys? Like, but that's why the love is there. That's why all that other stuff is there, because even though it's not fun, you have to do it anyways. Your soul needs you to do it. Another important aspect to all of this is patience. The professional understands delayed gratification. Basically, he says that resistance loves overambitious and unrealistic timetables. So it's really important that you conserve your energy because, again, like anything that's worth having, this is going to take time. This is not going to be something that's just going to snap your fingers and be done overnight, no matter what you're working towards. So, again, you have to love it. You have to be comfortable in the uncomfortable and, realize that patience is going to be needed. And so, this isn't a marathon. Like, it's super exciting at first when you're starting a new adventure, and so you might be a little bit ambitious and be like, oh my God, I'm going to put all my time and energy into this, and oh my gosh, like, I could totally lose like 15 pounds in 2 weeks. Like, no, okay? Like, these aren't realistic goals. Like, look at what you're trying to accomplish, and then, handle yourself appropriately. If you even make yourself a longer timetable, just so that you set your expectations low so that you're not feeling super deflated or, whatever, once that time comes. And so, and even still, just realize that as long as you're in the game, you're doing something. So even if something ends up taking you a lot longer than you thought it would, that doesn't mean what you're doing isn't what you're supposed to be doing. It just means that it's taking longer, and that's all it is. And so as long as you're sitting down every day, or every day you're putting in the work, or every weekend you're doing however you set your schedule up, as long as you're committing to that, then just realize that this is going to take time. He says on page 78 here, so she concentrates on technique, the professional masters how, and leaves what and why to the gods. So working on your craft instead, working on your technique, again, he says on page 84, he knows that by toiling beside the front door of technique, he leaves room for genius to enter into the back. So, again, when we focus on things that are more tangible, like technique, craft, the things that we can actually work towards, we allow ourselves to be open to inspiration, because we're not trying to force something that's not there. So if I'm, writing, like, okay, how can I work on my grammar? How can I work on making this sentence a little bit better? What is it that I'm really trying to talk about? And just by sitting there and the act of doing something might allow, inspiration to hit and, give me something really cool to write. Working out, like, okay, like, I am going to commit myself to this, and today I'm going to really focus on the technique of whatever. When we focus on those sort of more tangible aspects, it really helps kind of empower us and motivate us. And, you might wake up and feel really crappy, and then by the end of your workout, you're like, wow, I actually feel super good, and that was way better of a workout than I thought it was going to be, because you didn't set yourself up to be like, this is going to be the best workout ever. You were just like, let me take this step by step and really focus on my technique today and see what happens. And then also, never stop learning, never stop feeling like there isn't something more that you can get from this. So he uses an example of Tiger Woods in this book, how Tiger Woods, is amazing of a golfer as he is, he still, has a coach that helps him. And just being able to see other people's perspectives, getting, you might really understand something really well, but just being, again, humbled by the aspect that there's always something more to learn, you can always be better, is really going to help you kind of separate the artist from the person and keep all of that in check. So, the next thing that I'm talking about, and I'm getting close to wrapping it up here, but it's about schedules and mundane practices allow us to accept inspiration. So create organizational habits. He talks about kind of having like a Monday morning meeting with yourself, or however you decide to sort of sort that out. Look at what your schedule is. Look at where your priorities lie. What kind of appointments, all of that do you have going on for a week? And then, make sure that you account time for these sorts of things. And this is the thing that I'm going to struggle with the most, because I love to procrastinate. I love to have my free spirit schedule. And I'm just realizing that that is not any longer working for me if I want to actually make something that I feel really good about. And so, yeah, I already created a schedule, and I'm not here to tell you guys, make a schedule and I'm going to make the best one ever. Sometimes I think some of those people that have all the crazy, schedules and tasks lists and planners and all of that shit, like, to some extent, some of that is also resistance. If you're spending way more time in your planner than you are your actual, like, thing that you want to do, then you need, you're putting too much time in it. That's just another aspect of resistance. Like, you can make a simple schedule and see where things lie. My biggest thing is I don't realize how long things take me. So my mom and I are having a discussion. I think it's bad time management, but she was like, it's not really bad time management because you understand that like you need to be somewhere at a certain time. You just don't realize that it takes you 45 minutes to get there versus, 30 minutes, and you think it's 30 minutes. And so I'm not convinced. I think it's still kind of bad time management, but I like to think of hers a little bit, I guess it's a little bit more positive, but I'm just trying to right now make a schedule and pay attention to how long it takes me to actually do things, so that I can make a more realistic schedule and hopefully try to stick to it. So I'm not sure if I've shared this with you guys yet, but my husband is not here for a few months, and so I am definitely trying to take this opportunity to like invest time into myself and my writing and my podcasting and all of that, especially since I don't have, another person to take care of right now. I can really focus a lot more on that stuff, but I'm trying to set up a schedule that once he comes back, he'll fit nicely into. So like, for instance, he usually gets off work around 5:30 in the afternoon. So I'm trying, or in the evening. So I'm trying to, figure out a schedule that ends my day at 5:30 and allows me to have my weekends open. And my goal is to, awkward pause, to have that a part of it, be a habit, so by the time he comes home, I'm in it and we're rocking it. But we'll see. The last 2 days I set up my schedule, and the last 2 days I've not stuck to it at all. And so next week is the week, or this week, I guess for you guys. I'm filming this a little early, but this next week is my first week at really going at it. So I will let you know how it's going next week. But yeah, it scares me, and this is resistance. This is resistance in its fullest manifestation for me. And yeah, so to my last point here, he says on page 101, this is the last page of book 2, no mystery. There's no mystery to turning pro. It's the decision brought about by an act of will. We make up our mind to view ourselves as pros, and we do it. Simple as that. Yeah, real simple. So basically, this resistance shit, all of it is never going to go away. So you really at some point have to just make up your mind that this is something that you're going to overcome. Earlier this week, I did finally write for the first time. So it was pretty exciting. But I was standing in my kitchen and I was thinking about all these different things. And I was like, you have time to sit down and write. You should write right now. I was like, oh, but I have this, this, and this. And then I was like, oh, that's the resistance talking. Like, just go sit down and write, Allison. And so I did. And so I was thinking about it later, I'm like, was that robot mode? And you know how I had the whole episode on robot mode and how I hate it. And I'm like, actually, no, it's not robot mode. Because I have talked about with the robot mode stuff, like, it's important that you have meaning and some sort of purpose behind what you're doing. So in this series, we already know what that is, right? Like for me, it's my writing, okay? For me, it's my working out. These are 2 really important things. And the cleaning and the taking care of the house and all that, those are also very important. So it's a matter of, combining all 3 and figuring out how these fit in my values, why they're all important to me, and how I can schedule out my life to make sure all of them are being fulfilled in some way or another. And so I think that's still the difference between that and just being like, oh, I want to work out and I am doing it for like reasons that I'm not really sure about and whatever, or I want to do this and I'm doing them for reasons I'm not really sure about and haven't really thought about this through all the way and, blah, blah, blah. And so you're going to easily crumble, right? So with this, though, with the resistance, what I've realized is that when you have something that you have, so basically I kind of thought of it this way. The resistance gives a name to something. So you have all these thoughts, all these excuses, all of these things. And then when we realize what they're doing to us, they're trying to stop us from being the writer. They're trying to stop us from being the entrepreneur. They're trying to stop us from being our most fit self, right? Then we get to put a label on that. And once we put a label on it, it makes it so much more tangible, because before it's just all these ideas and excuses and we don't really know what to do with them, right? So I kind of have this idea, like, when you have a name for it, then you can jumble all the excuses up and you can kind of put them in a box. And you can set this box aside. And then you can go and you can sit down and you can do your writing. And then once you've finished it, or whatever the thing is that you're doing, right? For me, it's my writing. So once I finished it, then I can get up and I can open up that box and I can see more clearly what's in there. Is this still important? Do I still need to do this today? You know, whatever it is. So I just think that, like, when we have all these ideas and they're just flying around, it's really hard to focus and be like, oh, I'm just going to go and do it. Like, no, you really need to, like, at least for me, I need to be able to visualize putting all of that aside, telling myself this is okay, because I'm allowing myself to sit down for the next 3 hours or 4 hours or 1 hour or however much time you have, or have allotted to it, right? Because, again, that's why the schedules are important, because you're holding yourself accountable. That's what the professional does, right? So we recognize the resistance. We understand that it's there. And he describes in the book, it will be there every single day. He feels it every single day, the resistance. So I'm not saying that to sound scary, but I'm saying it because it's really important to understand that these things don't magically go away. It doesn't matter how healthy, amazing, wonderful you are. You can be Jocko and still look at your tennis shoes every single morning and not want to put them on. You can be this guy writing a book about resistance and still wake up and not want to write every single day. So really, this feeling is so normal. You're not lazy. You're not a piece of shit because you feel like this. You're just human. And it's not in our nature to do these things, because these things can really change our lives. These things can make, they put things in a perspective. They give us a different perspective. They make us make choices, which are hard. Like I said, I've really been enjoying my kind of free spirit attitude, but I'm not actually enjoying it. It's driving me crazy that I'm not doing my writing. And so at some point, it's like, I kind of made a post about this on my social media this week, but like, when you have too much freedom, it's almost like that kind of gives you an anxiety, because at some point you have to hold yourself accountable. I know when I first went off to college, I had all these people who had, in high school had expectations of me of showing up to my dance classes and my dance performances and all of these things. And then I went off to college and I no longer had expectations. Nobody cared if I showed up to dance class. Nobody was, checking up on me. I mean, every once in a while people might ask my mom, or my mom, my grandparents, whatever, be like, oh, how are things going? But nobody cared if I became a dancer or not. Only I did. And that was a really hard lesson to learn, but I still didn't fully understand, like, what all of that meant. So it's up to us. And that's hard because people don't want to admit that. They want to use their excuses. They want to blame the world for where they're at. And no matter what you have going on, the world is unfair to everybody. Now, we all have, and I've had conversations about this with you guys before, we all have varying levels of experiences. But the thing is we only know what we know. So I can only feel troubled by the things that I've experienced. You can only feel troubled by the things you've experienced. I can be humbled by them, and I can look at your scenario and maybe feel empathy and, use that as inspiration in my scenario to, like, not feel so bad or something. But at the end of the day, we can only feel so bad as we want to feel, and we can only have the experiences that we have. And so we just all have to figure out how to overcome them if, we want to better ourselves, if we want to be in these better scenarios. Okay. Did I talk about everything? No, there's still so much. I really, really recommend you guys buying this book. I just love it so much. It just, look at all my, well, if you're listening, I have all these little orange tabs in the book, and it just makes me happy. So anyways, The War of Art, Break Through the Blocks and Win Your Inner Creative Battles by Stephen Pressfield. I am Allison Crowell, the bored housewife. And thank you guys so much for watching this week. I really hope that this is helping you. It is helping me so much. I'm so happy we're going through this right now. So anyways, please like, comment, subscribe. Check out my website and sign up for my monthly newsletter. Hopefully we'll have a blog soon. We'll see. I have the page. It's just a matter of writing the blog. So anyways, yeah, I think that's about it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. And cheers. I'll see you soon. Bye.